This is a primer on coding with generative AI. It's a really exciting time to build with generative AI. Large language models have really changed the game. I got really excited about building with generative AI after I managed to build a whole mobile game app, which you can try on matchbeat.replit.app. And I am not a programmer. I'm not a professional programmer. I've never built a mobile game app, especially not from scratch. I've used no-code tools to build software before. But building from scratch with code, a whole mobile game app, this was new to me. Mobile game right now looks like this. It's called Matchbeat. You can try it. It's a pretty good functional game and it's pretty fun to play. So for example, if you start the game and you play just one cycle, you just match by shape first. So circle to circle, triangle to triangle, square to square. Then it makes you think differently and stretch your cognitive muscles by matching by color this time. Then number. These are pretty satisfying animations, pretty satisfying sounds, and I am really happy that I was able to build this app. It shows you some scores, how you did. Really cool stuff. So building this got me really excited about the possibilities. I mean, it's an amazing time to build. There are so many tools out there, and the tool landscape is basically what's making it exciting. These tools are really causing a revolution in programming. Most programmers have already started using them. But I think the really interesting thing is how they help people like me who are not programmers professionally to start building. I think it's an exciting time to build, even if you haven't built before, especially if you haven't built software before. So, in this primer video, I'm going to be going over these 9 topics. First, I'll talk about the first way that large language models or generative AI allowed us to code or helped us code. Which was getting them to generate code, and we would copy paste it. Then I'll talk about how the AI tools started being able to run code in their own interface, especially when we get to topic 3, how Anthropic's cloud started making React components and its artifacts. I think that's a game changer. We'll talk about that. After that, we'll talk a little bit about the limitations of cloud, and then go into tools like V0 by Vercel, how that does some things differently, and then Cursor, the new IDE that's powered by AI tools and how that does things differently, where you might run into limits with Cursor, and how you might use a tool called Replit with its AI agent. And then at the end, I'll describe my favorite workflow of working with a combination of these tools. Throughout all this, I'll be showing you some really cool example apps. One is a fireworks app and one is an ASMR app that we're going to be working with as examples. They are visually very beautiful, and I like showing them to you. Okay, so let's talk about the first way that these AI chatbots, especially ChatGPT, which was the first one to really change the game, learn to help us code and how we started coding with them. Basically, the first way to do it was we would ask for code with a simple prompt, something like this. Show me the code for a simple one-page HTML and CSS application. that is just a black screen with one button in the middle of it. When the user presses the button, fireworks animations fill the screen with CSS. Now, this particular kind of app that I'm asking for uses a specific tech stack or technologies, which is the combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is a really powerful combination and a really simple one, because whatever you produce with just these technologies, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, just runs on a browser. The user who sees it does not need to install any particular dependencies or software or libraries. It basically works in any browser, and also that makes it deployment-wise very simple, makes it very easy to deploy on a web server and share with others. So I usually like to build things with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So the first way that we learned to do this with AI was we would give AI a prompt like this, and it would help us by generating the code. But it couldn't run the code, and we would have to copy this code and put it into something like VS Code. Visual Studio Code is an example of an IDE, or integrated development environment. This is where computer programmers do most of their work, in environments like this. So in this case, you could create 3 files, one for the HTML, one for the CSS, and one for the JavaScript. But it's also, for simple apps, it's also possible to put all of these into one file, just one HTML file that has the HTML code and then the CSS code and then the JavaScript code all in one file. So for a simple app, one file is enough. Here, I had to actually go back and forth a little bit with ChatGPT to figure out how to make this work. The first version that it produced didn't work that well. It had a bug. I had to go back and forth with it to really come up with good working code. But ultimately, we came up with something good, and I can just copy and paste that into VS Code, create a new file, for example, fireworks.html, and just copy and paste the code here. Now, because I can save the file here, because I have the live server extension installed here, I can just right click on fireworks and press show preview. Let's close the tab that we're not using. As you can see, the HTML page is running on a local host, which means it's just on your computer. It's not on the cloud. Nobody else can see it. There's some fireworks happening randomly, but if you press the launch fireworks button, more fireworks happen. And here I'm pressing it multiple times. You can see that it's pretty beautiful. It works nicely. It's pretty much what I asked for. In terms of the details of it, like what the button should look like, what the actual animations should look like, a lot of it is actually the AI imposing its own taste, and just when I didn't give it details, just filling the blanks with its own ideas. And this is really impressive and interesting. So this is the first way, the default way that basically tools based on large language models have allowed us to code. They would generate code and we would copy and paste them into these IDEs. And this is a very powerful mechanism to keep in mind that forms the basis of many other things that we're going to be discussing in this video. But let's move on to topic number 2. The next evolution that happened was basically that this ChatGPT environment that previously could just generate text and then we would have to copy and paste it somewhere, They improved it a bit. That, for example, they made these little code boxes so that you could differentiate between the code that you needed to copy and the rest of the text in the narrative. But another thing that they did was that they provided ChatGPT with access to a coding environment right there without it needing your computer to run code. They gave it a coding environment in its own interface in the cloud, which they called Code Interpreter. After a while, they changed it to Advanced Data Analysis, but I think it's back to Coder or Code Interpreter now. And you can see that, especially when you ask for things related to data analysis, because basically this coding environment that they have given to ChatGPT is a Python environment. It runs Python code, and you can see when you tell it something like showcase your data visualization abilities using Python libraries with a synthetic data set. This is the kind of thing that it's able to do. It will generate Python code, which is particularly strong for data analysis and data visualization. And it will run the code, so you don't have to copy and paste it back into your local computer. It will run the code right there on the cloud in its own interface, and it will produce the results of the code. And in this case, the results are visualization graphs, data visualization. And that's why ChatGPT with Code Interpreter is a really, really powerful tool for data scientists and for non-data scientists to be able to do some data science. It's really powerful. However, there is a limit to this. These graphs that are created are basically just the static output of the code. They are not interactive software. So something like our fireworks example would still not work here. It wouldn't run on the cloud. We would still have to take the code and bring it to our local environment, copy paste it into VS Code. So that's the issue right now. ChatGPT's Code Interpreter can really just generate the static output of the code. It can run the code, show you the static output, but it doesn't create and run interactive software. Now, this is when we get to topic number 3, how cloud changed the game with its artifacts. So, you can see in the user documents for Anthropic's cloud that cloud is able to build artifacts as you talk to it. Now, these artifacts can be many things. They can be markdown documents, just snippets of code. They can do single page HTML, which unlike ChatGPT can actually run it. So if I ask Cloud to actually create a single page HTML web page, it can actually run the whole thing. But possibly the most interesting artifact that they've added is the ability to create interactive React components. Now, React is a powerful JavaScript framework that was built by Facebook, the company that's now called Meta, back in 2013. And it includes very powerful ways to make JavaScript components in HTML, CSS, JavaScript applications for web apps and websites. Now, the ability of Cloud to create these React components is game-changing. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go to a session of Cloud and let's try this example. Um, I want to make a mobile app with React and CSS that is just an ASMR sensory experience where touching the screen produces beautiful patterns or shapes that move around in mesmerizing patterns. The more you press, the more sharp shapes sprout from under your finger. All graphics should be CSS with no image assets needed. When testing the app on desktop computers, mouse clicks should have the same effect as mobile touch actions. Now, I've worked on this prompt a little bit because I know that in earlier versions of the prompt that I had tested that it could get some things wrong, so I've worked to improve it. Note here that I'm asking it to do all the graphics with CSS, with no image assets needed. That's an important thing if you just want to build a prototype and you want it to look good even without uploading any additional images to make it work. Especially when a cloud artifact wants to make it work entirely independently of any other files. The graphics should be made entirely with CSS. Now, CSS isn't capable of making all sorts of images, but you can do some pretty cool things with it. All right, let's see what Cloud does with this. I suspect that it's going to build an artifact. And because I've mentioned React, it's going to build a React component. The cool thing here is that not only will it write the code of the React component, but once it's done writing the code, it can run the code. Now, it can only do this if the full code is here. If it's just talking about a part of the code, it won't run. But if it manages to write the whole code, then the app will actually work right here on cloud without any other software, without using my local software or ID or anything, just on the cloud. Let's see if it works. Let's click something. Yeah, you can see that Cloud built a pretty cool, nifty design for me here. It's pretty fun to play with. So you can see here it has the entire code, and in preview mode you can see it working. The cool thing about Cloud artifacts is you can even publish them. Once you press publish, you have a link, and this link is basically shareable with anyone. Anyone who gets this link can see what you built and play with it. So here you can see that the artifact loaded for someone who maybe doesn't even have access to Cloud. It's on something called cloud.site where artifacts get deployed, but anyone can play with this on their computer or on their mobile phone. It's pretty cool that Cloud helped us build this. Now, when Cloud built this, the reason it was able to run the code is that the whole code is here. Sometimes when you ask for changes in the code, like, I don't know, make the circles 50% smaller, something like that. Sometimes when it starts editing the code, it won't rewrite the entire code. It will just rewrite a part of it and say, you know what, the rest of it is like what we had before. And when it does that, because the code becomes incomplete, it won't actually be able to run it. In this case, it looks like it probably wrote the whole code again. Yeah, the circles are now smaller. But sometimes it does this thing where it says, well, you need to change this part and the rest of the code will be exactly the same. When it does that, the code won't run anymore because it's incomplete. and you have to try and force it to basically rewrite the full code. But doing that also uses up context window, right? Like when apps start to get beyond a certain level of complexity, then cloud will have a hard time handling it, especially because cloud is trying to handle the entire app in one file, whereas most good apps are composed of multiple files that communicate with each other, refer to each other, and cloud is not able to do that. So it does understand that an app can have multiple files, and it can give you the code for multiple files, but then that becomes too complex for it to run in its own coding environment. So it won't be able to run a multi-file application. So that's where tools like V0 by Verso come into the picture. A tool like this is sort of designed to specialize on coding, and especially actually in the case of V0, specialize in coding front end. Now something like that ASMR app was basically a front end component. But cloud does a lot of other things, right? Cloud can talk to you about ideas, research, write documents, write code. It can do a lot of things, but because it can do a lot of things, it may not be great at specializing in certain things. And that's where V0 or tools like this come into the picture. Let's try giving our fireworks prompt. Let's try the ASMR prompt on V0. Let's see how it would handle this. We don't need the image. Just talk about the ASMR experience here and press run. Now you can see that it's an AI chatbot similar to ChatGPT or Cloud, but the difference here is it's really specialized to code, and it can handle multiple files and apps that have multi-file structures. Here, for example, on its own, it decided that the app needs at least 3 different pages. And it built, when you click on code, you no longer see just one file like you would in cloud. Actually, I got an error here. Okay, resolved that error. You can see that it has multiple files and it runs right there on the cloud without needing any software from you. It lets you test it out, and it built some pretty cool thing over here. Now, when you ask it to edit something, say, let's make it more beautiful. Here I'm asking it to use its own opinion as well. You can see that it can go in and edit multiple pieces of the code. Here though, it still looks like when it edits a file, it edits the entire thing. It rewrites the entire code for every file. And that is not very efficient because when it starts to get to larger and larger files, this is hard to handle, and we pretty soon reach the context limits of these AIs. So it decided to make it more beautiful by adding other geometric shapes, adding like a blur effect. But yeah, the revised code works really well. This is something that would probably take some back and forth in if you were just working with Cloud or with ChatGPT, to write the code and then importing it into your own computer. But here V0 did a pretty good job, V0 by Versal. Now Versal is a really good tool for deploying your apps as well. So you can actually click on deploy. But even if you don't fully deploy on Versal, just clicking on this share button will give you a link. It has a weird URL, kind of like Cloud Artifacts, but that link is shareable and works, and other people can play with the app that you built, and you can share it. Now, for something more complex that goes maybe even beyond front end, we would probably not use V0. Something that has been really game-changing in recent months is this IDE called Cursor. I'm opening it here, and it looks almost exactly like VS Code. This is because VS Code, which is a really popular IDE, it stands for Visual Studio Code, is open source, and many people who want to build new capabilities in IDEs will start with the code of VS Code. It's called forking. So they fork the open source code of VS Code, and then they build on top of it. But the good thing here is that it's a familiar environment. If you're used to working with VS Code, you can install all the extensions that you have in your VS Code in here as well. And you can open the same folders in the same way. The main difference between Cursor and VS Code is this AI chat that they've added here. This is not in regular VS Code. So you can see that I've just opened the same folder that I had built before. This was ChatGPT's code, and it's running a preview here with the same extension that I had in VS Code, live server. And you can see that the app works, and it's pretty cool. But it's just a one-file app, and one-file apps are pretty easy to handle with Cloud and other things as well. In order to show you the strengths of Cursor, I'm going to use the AI chat. So the AI chat, which can be brought up by pressing Control L, and then you can add context to it, which means basically uploading a file, kind of like how you do with Cloud and ChatGPT and other things. But here the context is really your code base or your files in your file structure for the app. Currently, this app only has one file, the fireworks.html file. Let's see how it works when you try to edit things here. One of the cool things I can do here with Cursor is to really get into professional programming mode with a multi-file app. I can say, turn this program into a professional, multi-file, well-structured application using best practices from modern web development. Keep the stack limited to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And for context, I will basically show it this file, so it knows that I'm talking about this file. Press enter. You notice here also it says which LLM is it using behind the scenes. It's using Cloud Sonnet. So here for itself, it designed a file structure that it's going to use. It's suggesting that we make all these files. All of the suggestions that it is making, it's going to let me decide if I want to apply it or not. if I press the apply button here in this corner, it shows me what's going to happen. A new file is going to be created. This new code is going to be created in that file. And then I have the option of accepting or rejecting these changes. I'm going to accept. Next suggestion, a CSS file. If I press apply, it's going to show me what new CSS file is going to be created. And I press accept. There's something interesting happening here. It's not just copying this and pasting it here. There's an AI agent here in the background that's looking at the previous code that was here and comparing that with the new code and then showing me what needs to change. Now in this particular case, because the file didn't exist and the file was empty, it looks like a pure copy paste, but it's actually not a pure copy paste that happened here. It's looking at every line and seeing which lines need to change specifically. And that's very powerful. It's Cursor's superpower compared to some of the other tools. Let's accept that. Let's accept that one as well. So now my program is becoming a very professionally structured web application, like how a professional programmer would do it. Now that I have this professional build of the tool, I can actually go ahead and delete the previous fireworks file. And the new app works by running the index.html file. I can show the preview of that, and you can see that it's now index.html that's running, but it does exactly the same thing. So it's now professionally structured, but the app is still working. This is great. Now let's see how Cursor works when you try to make improvements to this. Now let's make some improvements. I want the fireworks to look more amazing. Let's see what happens here. Here it's first thinking, well, first of all, I didn't give any context there, but it kind of knows, based on the previous conversation, what the file structure is like. Now it's deciding that the main file that needs to change is firework.js. And this is one of the benefits of modularizing an application professionally and splitting it up into files. Because now when an LLM wants to give you lots of code, it doesn't have to use up all the context window in a way that an individual file would not be able to get the complete code. So it's suggesting to make this change here, and now look what happened. It's comparing, when I pressed apply, comparing the existing code to the new suggested code, and then allowing me to accept or deny pieces, or allowing me to accept the whole thing. Usually it's better to accept the whole thing, but in some cases it might be making some mistakes and you might want to only accept a piece. Let's accept this. It's also suggesting some minor changes to styles.css. Now this is what the LLM has produced. This sort of thing is what Cloud does all the time. It puts a placeholder here, says your existing code should be like this, only change this part. Now this is really annoying when you're working in Cloud itself, because you have to, because first of all, the incomplete code won't run as an artifact anymore. And second of all, if you're copy and pasting it, you have to go and figure out where to copy and paste this. The cool thing that Cursor does is that when Cloud Sonnet produces incomplete code like this and you press apply, it puts an AI agent to task to figure out exactly what part of the code is being changed, highlight it for you so you can accept or deny, and then accept it. It makes it really, really easy to deal with those incomplete Cloud Sonnet generations and use their power. And this basically is the main mechanism for why Cursor has really changed the game of programming. Let's accept this other piece as well. All right, let's save all here and let's see what changes have been made. Oh, I see that I don't see any more fireworks here. So it's running into bugs. And this is what happens when your app starts to get more complicated. It starts to get harder for these AI agents to work with. Now, an interesting feature that Cursor has is that it allows you to, when you're talking to it, let's say I think there is a bug here. Nothing happens when I press the button. Here, instead of just regular enter that I could press, if I press Control Enter, it does something cool that other tools don't do easily. If I press Control Enter, it's going to make my whole code base, all the files there, into the context of trying to answer and basically look through them to answer. So it thinks it has found the bug. Let's see what happens when we press apply. See, we got a pretty long output from Cloud Sonnet, but when we press apply, we see that only one line is changing compared to the previous code. Let's go ahead and accept that. Save the file and see if it actually fixed the bug. It did not. So yeah, this is an example of an app that's getting more and more complicated, and you have to go back and forth with the AI to solve this. When I was building Matchbeat, I ran into problems like this many times, and that's why it's not everything is super magical and fast, and sometimes you have to iterate for hours and hours until you solve something. But it's still much faster than coding from scratch, at least for non-programmers. So the Matchbeat app that I built, the first version of it took a whole day of going back and forth with an AI agent. The first version that I could really call production ready, that I would be able to submit to the App Store, took me 3 days to build. And then the final version that I have right now has taken me almost 7 full days of work going back and forth with these AI agents to build. Now this sort of thing where it runs into bugs and you have to go back and forth to try and fix it is not specific to Cursor. Almost all the AI tools will run into these problems. But usually if you're patient enough, you can solve and move on to the next thing you want to do. But a couple of specific limitations here for working with Versal. Unlike something like V0 by Versal, Cursor doesn't have any automatic deployment mechanisms here. It's really like a traditional IDE. It's meant to build your code base and then you have to go figure out other solutions to deploy it on the cloud. But tools like Versal and Replit, which we're going to talk about next, have that capability. Another thing to know about building something like this with Cursor is that there's no rollback functionality. Undoing is possible. You can Control Z, but it's very limited in its capability to roll back to a stable version that you liked before. V0 by Versal, also I haven't seen any rollback functionality there. But that's one of the things that I love about the Replit AI agent. So that's where we're going to go next. Replit. What I love about Replit and what they've recently added is this Replit agent, which basically helps you make an app from scratch. It does sometimes feel like it takes matters into its own hand a little bit too much, but it's great for taking an app through its early stages of development. And what I like to do with a tool like Replit is that I will take a prompt like this that I have given the basically the other tools. I would paste it here, but I would go back to one of those other tools and build on something that I liked before. Let me see, where was the best version of the ASMR code? Yeah, I kind of liked this idea that Cloud had here. I will take this code that's working. I will actually copy the contents, the entire contents, and then when I'm prompting in Replit, here I don't have to start from scratch anymore. I can say start with this as your basis, and I will paste the entire code that I got from Cloud into Replit Agent and press Start Building. Continue. Replit Agent is pretty magical, kind of like Cursor, but in some ways more powerful, in some ways less powerful. One of the really nice features that it has is a rollback functionality. So at some point when you reach a version of the app that you really like, and then you start developing it more, you can always go back, roll back if you hit a bug or if things didn't work out the way you planned. So here it's coming up with a plan. It wants to know if I want to build the initial prototype, and it is suggesting some other steps that I can take. I don't want to add sound effects right now, but and I don't want color themes, but let me add variations for animations and patterns, and then approve the plan and start. All right, so now you can see it's developing a whole file structure repository with a specific tech stack. Now, the really amazing thing here is that Replit, similar to Cloud, really likes React. And it builds with a framework called Vite that is a really powerful framework for building React apps and generally JavaScript applications. So here it's showing me all the things that it's doing. It's structuring the files, it's making the files, and it's even trying to run, I think, or maybe it's trying to install some libraries. I can see that it might be trying to install Node, or maybe it already has and it's just managing the dependencies. In some places it actually takes a screenshot to see how things are going. Wow, it has already created the app and deployed it, and I can actually play around with it right here. It hasn't deployed it to the cloud. It's actually just running the app right now that it has made. But this is a really powerful indication. Now I don't see, I basically see the initial code that I we had put in, but I'm not seeing much improvements. And let's ask it to do more things. Well, actually, let's approve what we have so far. Yes, everything looks good so far. Because it likes to figure out when it's done the plan correctly and then move on to the next thing. And you want to be able to roll back to what it's made up to here. Alright, so it says building the initial prototype is solved. Now it's moving on to the next steps of the plan that we had asked for. Different shape types and patterns. It's probably going to add some interface elements for us to select those. It's showing us which parts of the code it's changing. Yeah, but it's a little bit faster, makes things a bit more complex than Cursor would, and takes the matters into its own hand. I really like this feature that it takes screenshots sometimes to see what the app looks like. This is something that Cursor doesn't do. I don't know of any of the other AI tools that currently do this. There we go. Yeah, it has put in different shapes in there. Yes, I can see different shapes now. It's probably going to approve this part of the plan, add a rollback point, checkpoint, and then move on to other things. Yep. Now it's adding variations for the animation. So this is basically what I wanted to go over, all the different tools that are out there. The very last topic that I want to cover is what is my favorite flow between all the different tools that I just showed you. My favorite thing to do is just to start with cloud, because here it's a general purpose AI. You can bounce ideas off of it, brainstorm with it, ask it to make decisions, evaluate different options. This is always my go-to. In fact, even when I moved on to other code tools and moved the code and I'm actively managing the code elsewhere, I still come back to cloud from time to time to ask it questions that would help me along the way. And sometimes it can catch bugs that the other tools couldn't. So my favorite thing to do is to start with cloud, and specifically to start with building React components. Because I know then if I wanted to take it to Replit, Replit also likes working with React. So favorite thing to do is to go up to the point with cloud where I can see a visual output of my idea, and basically ensure that yes, this is the direction I want to go in. This is the right direction. When I have that, I take the code from cloud, take it to Replit, and start the prompting there. It has added different animation patterns here now. Yes, I see everything is good. Now it's going to basically say I did all the things I promised I'd do. So the implementation is complete for now. But I can always give it more tasks to do. There. Yep, you did all these 3 things really well. But now, for example, I want you to add interface elements to control all the variations that you added. Yeah, this is basically the flow I like to do. Take it from cloud into Replit. After you work with Replit a little bit, you may want to start moving things into Cursor, because I think Cursor is generally better for dealing with more complex code and larger files. The main reason being that I find it easier when I work with Cursor to manage things at a more detailed, granular level. When I work with Replit, I find that it tries to manage most things for me. Here it has added the interface elements that we wanted. I don't think the interface elements are actually working. I still see everything happening, but it's a good first step. I can keep working with it to see how to improve this. So yeah, this shows you my flow. And one last thing that I want to add is that in both Cursor and Replit, I found that, and it's pretty easy, you can even ask the AIs here how to do this, to synchronize with GitHub. The reason you want to synchronize your code bases with GitHub is, first of all, to have them on the cloud, to be able to move them between different apps, and importantly, to be able to do version control. Even Replit's rollback feature here, while it's nice, it's not a full-on version control system. But if you start syncing your files with GitHub, and Replit has extensions to do that, that will be a much better way to handle things. Other possible things that you can ask the AIs to do, so for example, I asked the AI here in Replit, how can I turn this into an Android app? And it helped me do everything. Figure out exactly what I need to do. There's something called the capacitor library that turns these React apps into Android apps. Then you can import that into something called Android Studio, and turn it into an APK, and then submit that to the App Store. When you submit to the App Store, you're going to need things like screenshots of your app, a video of your app, a promotional image, release notes, descriptions, and all of those are things that AI chatbots can help you build. They actually helped me build release notes in multiple different languages easily for Matchbeat. I'm excited to see it coming to the App Store soon. It's really, really an exciting time to build. Thanks for watching through this video with me. I hope you found it useful.